Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Macrosutra. I'm TCA Sharad Raghavan, Deputy Editor at ThePrint, and this time we're going to be looking at the finances of the Northeast. Now, before you think that this is a random topic, why are we talking about the Northeast? Let me assure you that it's timely, it's important to look at the Northeast right now, and to explain why and to explain what the finances of the Northeast look like, we have with us Radhika Pandey, Associate Professor at NIPFP. Thank you so much, Radhika, for joining us. So now, Radhika, let's first start with why we're looking at the Northeast right now. Why is it important that we look at it right now?
Yeah, so see, when we look at the finances, we normally focus on union government's finances. Even now, we are talking about whether the central government will be able to achieve its fiscal deficit target of 5.9% or not. And then there is discussion on state finances. Now, we do see some discussion on state finances, but a dedicated discussion on northeastern states is not happening, and that is needed because on the one hand there's a lot of support being provided to northeastern states in the form of dedicated grants, some specialized grants. They face some unique fiscal challenges which warrant some kind of support, and successive finance commissions have talked about the unique challenges that the northeast states face, and therefore they have proposed some kind of support interventions in the form of either specialized grants or higher share in some kind of grants, both in terms of statutory grants and non-statutory grants. So we need to see whether those grants are working or not. So there is a need to analyze the finances of these northeastern states, so that now we know that the 16th Finance Commission has already been notified. So what it should be looking at, is there a need to have a fresh look at the finances of Northeast states and how they have evolved over time. And this will help us to understand the efficacy of the various measures that have been implemented till now by the various finance commissions as well as by the government, whether they are working or not. Because these states are strategically important from the foreign policy perspective. Also, we know that, we had earlier Look East policy, then Modi government changed it to Act East policy. They share neighborhood with a lot of Southeast Asian economies. So they are strategically important, but they face certain fiscal challenges, which we will be talking about. So in that context, it is important to analyze what are those fiscal challenges and what is the kind of support mechanism that is needed. So therefore, there is a need to have a fresh look at the finances of Northeast states.
Right, and of course, on 1st Feb is the budget, and various budgets in the past have come out with packages for the Northeast. So if it shows that the Northeast needs help, it's absolutely timely to look at it now, because the budget is less than a month away, and it could possibly, include something that might help in particular targeted ways. So let's start then with, now, one of the most important things when we look at state finances are their debt levels. So what are the debt levels like in the Northeast?
So when we look at debt levels in absolute terms, and we look at in terms of rupees crore, we don't see Northeast states having very alarming levels of debt.
But these are small states also.
They are small states. But when we normalize them express the debt in terms of the size of the economy, maybe as a percentage of the gross state domestic product, that is the state GDP, then we find that these states feature amongst the top 10 heavily indebted states.
I see.
So that is a problem. We see across various years, say 2019-20, 2020-21, if we see on a map of India, we will see that these states always, some of these Northeast states always feature as the most heavily indebted state in terms of the liabilities to GDP ratio. That is the stock of debt, not the flow, not what they are borrowing every year, but what they have accumulated over time as a share of the size of the economy. That has risen to alarming levels. It's say for within the set of Northeast states, we find that Meghalaya and Nagaland, they are having very high share of liabilities to GSDP ratio.
I see.
And it's increasing over time. So for some states like Mizoram, it used to be 100% in 2014-15.
Wow.
Now it has come down to 39 and it's expected to come down to 36%.
Well, that's a good improvement.
It's a good improvement. So we need to see northeastern states as a whole, but also see the within the northeast states, are there some heterogeneity? Are there some factors that are leading to an upsurge in the debt level as a share of GSDP? So again, in absolute terms, the numbers may not be large, but in terms of the size of the economy, in terms of the share of GSDP, the debt levels are high, and they touch even now for Nagaland and Meghalaya, they are above 45%.
Wow.
Now, this is in contravention to the debt path which is laid by the 15th Finance Commission. So, 15th Finance Commission, because after COVID, they had to come up with a revised glide path for fiscal deficit and debt path. So, the 15th Finance Commission laid out a glide path for center as well as states. So, for most of these northeast states, we find that they are deviating from the path, the glide path of how much the liability as a share of GDP should be reduced over time. These states are not they are not following that glide path.
So this is something that the 16th Finance Commission should take note of.
Yeah. So this is important because why is it that the stock of GSDP has not fallen substantially, and for some states, in fact, it has seen a rapid surge. So that is one of the characteristic of the fiscal dynamics of these northeastern states.
Right. And now one of the reasons that states go into a lot of debt is because the revenues are not enough. And now looking at revenues, it also tells us whether a state is independent or more dependent on the center.
Correct.
So what is happening with the North? Are they becoming more independent or are they becoming more dependent on the center?
So they are dependent on central government. For example, Mizoram, 87% of its total revenue receipts comes from transfers.
87?
Yes.
Wow.
So from central government, and this is as per the 15th Finance Commission.
So
it may be a slightly dated number because it is as per 2018-19. But still, it is quite substantial, and that holds true for most of the Northeast states, that they depend on transfers from the central government. And when we say transfers, it includes both devolution of taxes as well as the grants and aids that are provided by the government. As per the Finance Commission recommendations, and also outside the Finance Commission recommendation. So overall, the share of transfers in the revenue receipts of northeastern states is quite high. It is much higher than the general states. Like if we exclude the northeast states and we look at general states, their all India average is much higher as compared to the own tax revenue for northeastern states. So they depend a lot on transfers, and a lot of it has to do with the economic structure of these states. One is that, the sectors which could help in augmenting the tax capacity, those sectors do not play a prominent role in these states. For example, the industrial base is very weak. They are mainly, these states are either agrarian economies or they are service oriented. The manufacturing sector, the industrial sector, leaving aside, say, Assam, which has some industries, but leaving aside Assam, we do not find industrial base to be very dominant in these states. And if the industries are not doing fine, we will not have a substantial scope for increasing the taxable tax base of these states. And another reason is the complex topography, hilly terrain, there are internal strife. So a lot of factors are there. And the other thing is that their GDP is quite volatile because their GDP is coming from either mining activities
Right.
or it's coming from forestry. So
I
it
see.
is very unsustainable. If the mining activity takes place, it's not environmentally sustainable, but the GDP gets a boost.
Right.
So the GDP growth also, if you look at the trajectory of GDP of these states, we find it's quite volatile. In some years, it is the nominal GDP growth at 16%. It then falls to 8%.
Okay.
So when your GDP is not following a stable course, it's very hard to ensure that own tax revenues become more stable. So there are a lot of these unique fiscal characteristics that these states face, and therefore their dependence on central government is quite high.
And so, did you look at just the last year, or have you seen it over a little time period?
We've looked at over last 4-5 years,
and it's remained stable?
Yeah, it has. So it's still substantially higher.
Right. But we can't say that it's either getting better or worse.
It is. So for some states, it is getting better. But for most of the states, it is quite high. As I mentioned, Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, for these states, it is the dependence on central government transfers is quite high as compared to the general states. So for some states, like for Assam, it is improving. For Tripura, it is improving, but not for some of the other states. So it is a general characteristic of these states, which has been also pointed out by the 15th Finance Commission.
Right. And now again, when we talk about the fiscal health of states, and we say that, they're very indebted, but if they're borrowing to spend on, say, something like CapEx, then you can be like, that's okay. At least it's going to generate growth.
Yeah.
But if they're spending mostly on just paying wages or pensions, then that's a problem. So,
absolutely.
What are the finances of the northeastern states saying in this regard?
Yeah. So here also the situation is worrisome because as a cohort, these northeastern states incur a higher share of their expenditure on committed expenditure.
Right.
Now, when we say committed expenditure, it typically includes salaries, pensions, and interest payments.
Right.
So these three are the committed items of expenditures, and for some states, for example, Nagaland, 70% of the revenue receipts is being spent only on these three items.
Oh, wow.
So again, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram, they are spending more than 50%, 55%, even 60% of their revenue receipts are being spent on this committed expenditure. And within committed expenditure also, the bulk is going on payments and on salaries. So, and it's increasing. If we look at from 22-23 to 23-24, we look at the budget statements of these states, we see that the expenditure on salaries and expenditure on pension has increased. Whereas, obviously when that happens, the capital outlay will see.
Of course, you don't have enough money.
Yes. So from 22-23 to 23-24, for some of these states, we see that the capital outlay has seen a decline. Right. Same again, Nagaland, because 70% is being allocated towards committed expenditure, it is coming at the expense of capital outlay, which has seen a decline from 22-23 to 2022-23, 23-24. So if we want more private investment, if we want more infrastructure development, more funds have to be allocated towards capex, but that is not something that we see for Northeast states. Most of the Northeast states that we find that more than 50%, 50 to 70% of the committed expenditure of the overall revenue receipts is being allocated towards committed expenditure.
I see. So, but then these states that because they want to spend more, and I guess a lot of it is committed expenditure, they'll need to borrow more if they want to do more capex.
Yes.
But are these states finding it easy to borrow more? I saw from an article that they're also having some problems where the bonds issued by these state governments are not very attractive. Companies don't want to invest in these.
Right. So, this state development loan market, which is called the SDL market, does not gather much attention, but overall SDL market, like overall states bond market, suffers from a number of challenges. Like it is not as liquid as the central government securities market.
Right.
So, and within the SDL market, there is a lot of concentration and heterogeneity. A few states are able to borrow more, and their securities are being traded. Just for example, top 5 states account for 60 to 70% of the overall trading activity.
And these would be the usual suspects: Gujarat, Maharashtra, like those kind of states, right?
So the bigger states are able to command a higher volume of trading activity amongst the overall SDL market. And there also we see that the Northeast states feature at the bottom, in the sense that their share in the overall trading activity is minuscule. For all these states, Assam has still some trading activity, but for the other states, there is a problem. And that has to do with a number of things. Why investors are not investing in the bonds or the securities of Mizoram or Meghalaya.
Because they aren't sure that they'll repay.
Absolutely. So that is one. And even if they have bought, they are not trading. So what happens is that it is being held till maturity. These bonds are being held till maturity. There is no trading activity happening. And the reason for that is that if you look at the investor profile, particularly of state development loan, it's mostly it's the insurance companies and mutual funds.
I see. Who like to hold.
Because we know that their asset liability profile is long term. So they would like to hold. Whereas if we look at foreign portfolio investors, their share is minuscule. They are still investing. We are talking about their investments in central government securities. We've talked about central government securities being included in the Bloomberg index now. Earlier, JP Morgan. Now it's being included in the Bloomberg Emerging Market Index. But in contrast, foreign portfolio investors do not seem to be interested in state development bonds, and in particular for these small states, they are not interested. So maybe there's need for better information dissemination. Maybe there is lack of fiscal transparency. Maybe there's need for greater credit rating. So and that will lead to greater interest and greater appetite of investors in the state government loan. So there are these infirmities and challenges in the overall state development loan market, the entire SDL market. And if we just compare central government securities trading and state development loans trading, they account for just 5 to 6%.
Right.
And within that also, it's just these top 5-6 states that account for 70 to 80% of the trading volumes. And rest is a very small proportion which is held till maturity.
Okay. And so now there seem to be 3 players in this. There's the state governments, there's the central government, and there's the Finance Commission.
Right.
Now, what can each of these do to improve the situation?
So for Finance Commission, it is important to see that whether, the kind of, firstly, there is a need to relook at the finances. And secondly, why it is that the burden of debt has not declined.
Right.
That is one. Other thing is that these state governments, particularly the Northeast states, they have to see that their FRBM, the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management legislation, they have been updated with the latest trajectory.
Right.
There are some states where even though their fiscal responsibility legislation is updated, but it does not have the updated debt trajectory. So there is no guidance on what is the debt trajectory, and that inhibits the investors also to invest, because they don't know what is your direction, your trajectory, what's your plan for debt reduction. So these are some of the issues that Finance Commission or any body looking at the finances need to relook, and also look at the markets. This is something which has not been looked at, but either the government or the commission needs to look at the challenges facing the bond market, the challenges facing the SDL market, and what needs to be done. The Clearing Corporation of India Limited has come out with a lot of research papers on this.
Okay.
There are a lot of these studies which show that, the yield on these bonds do not reflect the fiscal health of state. Okay, for example, Gujarat, which is fiscally healthy, which has a low fiscal deficit, Gujarat's bond is also having the same cutoff yield as a bond of, say, Mizoram.
Oh, wow.
So that is something which needs to be looked at, that why yields are not reflecting the market
The reality, yeah.
why they are not reflecting the fiscal health of states. So these are some of the issues that will go a long way in improving the, if they are looked at, they will induce greater market discipline. They will induce some steps towards reducing the debt path of the northeast states. So, and once it is realized that, markets are functioning, then maybe some support is needed for these northeast states, because maybe when market starts functioning, the yields will rise for these states.
Right.
So then some kind of support may be provided, non-market borrowing support may be provided by Finance Commission. So there is a need to have a comprehensive look at the finances, the debt burden, the fiscal responsibility legislation, as well as the overall market condition. Asking the investors why you're not investing, stakeholder consultation, what deters investors from investing in state bonds, even though the cap for investment has been increased. So it's that foreign investors have the cap, but it's lying unutilized. They're not investing.
They don't want to.
They do not want to. So a good suggestion that came from the 15th Finance Commission itself was that there should be credit rating of state government bonds.
Right.
There should be some transparency that will induce investors to invest, and therefore the yields will then reflect the realities, the fiscal health effectively. Markets will function more effectively, and that will induce greater fiscal discipline.
Right. And so now we have a question from the audience. He asks, we've seen a lot of improvement from the infrastructure point of view in the Northeast, with both road and train connectivity improving, which has positively impacted the tourism, the travel economy in the area. But for a state to grow, they also need a lot of private investment as well. So how can private players be encouraged to invest in these states, considering that they also have various problems to do with the fact that they're border states?
Right. So, so we've talked about that these states are border states. These face unique challenges in terms of their fiscal capacity. But at the same time, as we discussed, that they are strategically important states. So what is needed is that we need to identify which industries can flourish in different states. For example, in Assam, we have seen petrochemicals. For example, in Sikkim, there is a scope for greater hydroelectric power projects.
Right.
Dedicated policies towards identifying those industries which are strategically more relevant for different states, that will help in improving the private investment environment in these states. Secondly, skilling is very important.
Of course. I mean, across India, but also in the Northeast.
Yes. And because, there is labor is available, it's at low cost, but skilling is important. Startups need to be incentivized to invest in Northeast states. So a lot of these steps need to be taken to improve the private investment climate. And a good part of that is also to be linked with what we discussed, fiscal transparency, well-functioning markets, deep and liquid markets, more depth in the market, greater fiscal transparency. That will induce greater investments, because that will lead to greater capital outlay by both government and also by private investors.
Right. Okay. So, there you go. The fiscal situation in the Northeast is not looking good. Their debt levels are high. Their own levels of revenue are quite low. They're very dependent on the center. They don't seem to have a plan on how to reduce this debt in a sustainable way, how to reduce their fiscal deficit levels. There's no concerted plan that they have. The Finance Commission really needs to look at this, because it needs to come up with some sort of plan to help out these states. Maybe it could be a rating system for all states, but basically there needs to be a thought out process to improve the situation in the Northeast in particular. It's an important part of India and an important part of the upcoming economic policies that are going to come out. It's the budget. The 16th Finance Commission report will come out in about a year and a half. All of these things need to look at the Northeast in a very concerted way. But for now, that's all we have for you. Thank you so much for watching.